Hey, what's going on, guys? And welcome back to my workbench. Well, technically not my workbench, but my work area, but another story unto itself. Anyway, where I last left off, I was going to be putting on a gloss coat after a couple days and decals and so on. Well, I did that as such. Here's how it went in order with the organization. I let the paint fully cure for a couple days, and then I applied my future gloss coat. And I didn't apply it in a heavy. I dusted it twice, so this way it would properly cover the paint job. I didn't want it. I was afraid of it lifting off, so that's what I did. I let the future coat fully cure for a couple days, and then I went to decals. And this is the extent of it so far. Once I applied the decals, which only took a day. I also used a method for the decals to look like they actually, if you can see closely, hopefully, if you notice here, the decals look like they have been painted on. A little technique I used, give me a few minutes, I put it somewhere. Oh, there it is. Basically, I used a microscale method, which is very common amongst modelers. I use microset followed by microsol. Unfortunately, I don't know where the microset went, but usually you apply that first, put the decal on, let it sit there for a few minutes, wick off any excess, leave it alone. And once it was ready to go, you put on the decal solvent, and what it does is it causes it to conform to the surface of where you're decaling. Sometimes, if it's difficult cases, I go with this one, the Filzys. This is actually used by model railroaders everywhere, and I prefer using this because I learned how to use it. Basically, like I said before, it turns the decal into almost like a paint, almost like paint, makes everything conform. When I put this decal on, and if you can see closely, hopefully, try not to shove it in your face, and you can see me here where my finger is. That is a formation light, I think. The decal would have not gone over this, but after the microscale method and the application, this is the end result. Worked its magic, and it looks good. Now, in case you're wondering what the lines were, this is a wash. Basically, it goes into the recesses of the model, as you can see here, like in here, all amongst here, the spot, and even in here. Basically, it darkens the areas where it's recessed and keeps it from looking like a toy. More realism. It's a long, complicated story. I'll have to explain it to you new guys one day. And also, this only works on engraved panel lines, as you can tell. The mix I use is usually a mineral spirits and oil paints, but because I was working upstairs last night putting the wash on, a line wash. I ended up doing a little experiment because of a fellow modeler a couple of years ago. Wherever he is now, God bless him, because this was a smart move and because I was being very precise and careful. I used lighter fluid with oil paints. Now, for those of you who are familiar with lighter fluid, it does dry up quick, but it's also very, very flammable. So I used it sparingly as well as the oil paint. Especially with this, since I'm doing a prototype, I didn't want it to look like it was done over 100 missions over the Pacific. It's, like I said, this was flown only twice, at the most. And that's what I wanted to look like. Keep it simple and just look like the real deal, but at the same time not look war-weary and battle-scarred. That's what I was focusing on. I wanted to make sure this was pristine and this was clean. However, like I said, the panel lines look really, really good, and that's what I was aiming for. And that's the end result right here. If you can see it, cool. If not, I'll have to explain more. Also, the interesting part about this is what it did to the overall color. Basically, what I did with the wash was ran along the recessed lines, wiped off the excess with a paper towel or tissue paper. And since I wasn't being sloppy with this one this time around, I was keeping it simple as possible. We just went along the panel lines, let it dry, wiped off any excess. I wiped off a little more this morning to make sure there wasn't any streaks whatsoever. Like I said, it's a prototype, not the one that participated in combat, and that's what I was aiming for. And I mean, I'm sure there's a couple more things I gotta do. I also had to redip the clear parts in future floor finish with good reason. Unfortunately, clear parts are, even though they're well molded and they're crisp, and they're actually rather distortion free, the problem is I didn't do a very good paint job. This is actually the rear end of the canopy. I didn't do a very good paint job because I was still trying to get everything in order. So what I did was I used a 91% isopropyl alcohol, which is also what I used to clear up my airbrush as well as clean up any areas that have dropped with acrylic paint. I just cleaned them off, made sure there was no fingerprints or anything. Dipped them again in this. And any excess, matter of fact, I will show you here. Any excess, I put on a paper towel, if you can see it. Hopefully, well, that'll have to do, but if you can see it from a horizontal plane, there we go. There's the clear parts right there. Basically, I put them on the napkin, on a paper towel and napkin. This way it'll wick away any excess, but also it made them more clear and less distorted. I'm going to let them dry and I let them dry and I'm going to let them fully cure for a couple days before I paint them again. Unfortunately, I don't have any Edward masks or Montax masks. I usually do everything free-handed, or I use Tamiya masking tape and a sharp X-Acto blade. But in this case, because the scribing on the clear parts canopy, really not that good, I do it free-handed. And that requires a lot of patience and small paintbrush, and a pair of these. Now, I'm 39 years old, and most modelers, as they get older, they start to realize that their eyes are not as sharp as they once were when they were younger. Well, I didn't pick up prescription glasses yet, although that's going to happen in a few more years, especially with my trade as a welder. So I just picked up some cheapo magnifying glasses from, like a dollar store or Walmart. And these helped me greatly. I just had to make sure I tested the magnification carefully so I didn't get them too strong or too weak, for example. And they actually fit my head. Unfortunately, I got one of those big Mardi Gras floating parade heads, or one of those things, in that order somewhere. Mardi Gras parade float head. There you go. So I use this whenever I'm doing fine work or little fine detail. Matter of fact, as for the tires and the landing gear, I will show here. If you can see, these I did a wash on these, but I didn't do anything to landing gear, although I should. I am going to dry brush the landing gear a little bit, which I'll explain once all said and done. And in case anybody remembers the propeller I did from earlier, I also applied wash to the propeller. I don't know if you can see it, but you can see it looks a little more realistic than it did earlier when I first painted it. It added a little depth to it. I also put the decals on the tips of the propellers, but I still got to fix it with a little bit of paint. Hopefully I got the right color for it. I'm hoping that I got a gloss red somewhere, Tamiya. Because I do not have gloss red from testers, and I am not going to be using that anytime soon. Because, personally, I think the red the red that was used for the decals was a little bright. Matter of fact, we'll get back to the decals on this. As I mentioned before, Hasegawa usually prints their own decals for their kits. And most of the time they're pretty good, but sometimes they're a little delicate, so you got to be careful when you're applying them and using whatever decal solvents and setting solutions, because they could do some damage, or they could melt away, which is what you do not want. But in this case, with the prototype, like I said, I think I've mentioned it before in one of my earlier videos, the decals were printed by Cartograph, and they were actually pretty tough and pretty rugged. However, you can't use piping hot water on any decals printed by Cartograph because it'll cause the decals to actually shrivel up or fold up on you real quick. So I had to make sure the heat of the water was just right. I didn't want to do cold water because it would have been a fight. I was been afraid to tear the decals, but also didn't want to make it too hot. So I found the right heat, the right temperature on it. No, I didn't go as far as using a thermometer. That is overkill. I just wanted it just right where I could stick my finger in and see if it's tolerable for a second or not. But that's another story. Back to the decal. I put the decals on, did the setting solution, and like I said, they conformed beautifully. They sat very well, and I didn't have to do any modifications to them. None whatsoever, which made life a lot easier. So basically, I'm letting this dry for the next day or two, or be fully ready to go. I'm going to wipe off any excess left, give it a flat coat. I'll explain that a little bit more, and then I will do final assembly. And then we'll see what happens from there. But this is what I got for now. and I will keep you guys updated on the next one. So, happy modeling, take it easy guys, sorry about the haphazard craziness going on. I got things to do, so take it easy, have fun.